Howdy Coopers. So this is going to be the CJ5, the 1954 CJ5 Jeep Part 2. So kind of the first video, we went through all the axles and stuff, got it running. It definitely had some problems in the transmission and transfer case. It was noisy, and there was actually, just shortly after the last video ended, I drove it to the gas station, filled it up. I got up there, and the transfer case or transmission or something was locked up. You put it in gear and let the clutch out, it just killed the engine. I'm going to do a quick montage. I don't want this video to be quite as long as the other one, of scatterness. I'm going to pull the PTO, the transfer case, the transmission out of it. We're going to come back in here and quickly, highly edit it. We're going to explode the transmission and throw it back together. I've actually already stuck it back in the Jeep. And then right here before us, I've already took apart, and some of the parts of this is still in the vat, but I've got this Dana 18 transfer case. It's kind of unusual because the front axle and the back axle drive shaft run offset. They're both offset like the front end, not like most vehicles. You know, the pumpkin on the rear axle is usually centered. This one's offset like the front end. Anyway, let's get that little montage out of the way, and I'll catch you back here in about 3 seconds, and we'll put this transfer case together. Well, tubers, Jeep, round 2. Well, I'm not really excited about starting this. I'm a little bit confused. So we got to pull this PTO off, and if you look up right above the drive line there where the shifter goes up through the floor, it doesn't look to me like it's going to be room to get it out. I don't know. Anyway, I have procrastinated enough. It's 2 days later. We got to get busy, so I'm going to get busy. Was that it? Well, this kind of went simpler than I thought it could. It just had 4 screws there, and it popped right out. That looks pretty rusty and rough in there. It's not a very good sign. Well, that's full of water. I say full of water, I mean it's full of water. Alright, to do anything else, I've got to get, oh by the way, I got the front drive shaft taken out. To do anything else, I've got to get this skid plate off. And it's got a couple of bolts here for a motor mount or a transmission mount, and then the transfer case mount. And I'm just going to start seeing what comes loose, I guess. Okay, so I was reading there's a cotter pin and a nut in here, and I read you got to take that off before this will separate from the transmission. It looks like there's a twisted off bolt up here in the corner we have to get out. There's only one up here, and I guess 2 right here, only 3 bolts. I figured that nut would be tight. Not supposed to be. Good Lord. That was not what I was expecting. I thought that was a boss on the side of it. It's just a chunk. Oh, I got it out. Well, let's go ahead and scatter this thing and see what there is to be seen. I ordered an eBay rebuild kit, and this is what I got. I want to kind of make sure that we got the right kind of stuff. So let's throw this thing together. So I'm going to give you a quick autopsy report here. The transmission actually looked pretty good. There really wasn't much wrong with it. In fact, there wasn't really anything wrong with it. I just sort of took it apart, put some bearings in it, cleaned it up, put it back together. This here is the input shaft that goes in this. It goes in right here through this hole. This is actually the only gear I reused. It's higher, and I think that it was out of the moisture. But this transfer case and the transmission were both full of rusty water and a oil mixture. It looked really rough. This is the intermediate gear. It goes right here and runs on the input gear, just like so. And it had quite a bit of water damage. There's a tooth gone, and then this wear face here, it's got a wear ring. This was really rough. This had been hot, you could tell, and had some pretty bad wear. So these are the output. This is the output shaft. This is the low gear. It also has got quite a bit of water damage. There's quite a few teeth. It's got a few teeth gone off of it. It's pretty rough looking. And then this is the high speed gear, and this gear is supposed to go on to here. This gear has a metal to metal bearing surface. There's no bearing here. There's no bearing material. There's no brass, no bushing, nothing. Anyway, this being full of water, this thing galled some of the metal off of here into this gear, and this gear won't even slip up on there. I had to get really rough with this with a hammer to get this apart. This won't even go on the new shaft. So anyway, we got a new high-speed gear. Fits nicely. Used but nice looking low gear. Let's put this together. I'll show you how it works as we go together with it. Alright, I think the first gear we got to put in here is the intermediate gear. And we've got two roller bearings, two needle bearings. Okay, I would like for this not to leak, and there's no seals on this shaft here, so I'm going to put just a little bit of silicone inside this hole, and then just a very little bit on this shaft here before I drive it all the way in. Okay, so I just figured something out. When I took this old one apart, there was a bearing that was pressed on here just up against this gear. Or I think it was pretty much up against that gear. And there are actually supposed to be more stuff here. It's got a, this came in the new kit, this washer thing. This obviously goes right here, and then apparently there's some kind of a snap ring or something that's supposed to go right here. This was not in this transfer case when I pulled it apart. So I bet what was happening when this thing locked up, when I stopped, this gear had slid over and was contacting this case or something. In fact, yeah, you can see it's got grind marks and there's little pieces going out of the top of that. So basically here's what I came up with. Got a snap ring. This is a really terrible design, I think, because when we press this bearing on here, the only thing that keeps this bearing from going farther is going to be this snap ring. And this bearing has got the potential to have quite a high amount of side load on it. Okay, so this is the gist of the high-low neutral. We can move this through this shift fork. This would be neutral. One thing I don't like about this is when it's in neutral, this gear here spins on this shaft, and so it doesn't have a bearing. There's no bushing or anything. And this seems like a really easy way to end up with something like that, and I'm sure that's probably why that happened. But anyway, this would be neutral, this would be high gear, and this would be low gear. Okay, this is the front, the shaft that goes to the front end, and this is how the transmission is kicked from two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive. There's just a little bronze bushing inside this shaft here. Let's pack that full of grease. Make sure that's well lubricated. Okay, I'm going to make some changes here. We got a couple plugs that I pulled out. They got springs and balls. This originally had, I think it's in the vat right now, there's a little rod that goes in here between these two shift forks. And what it does is when you've got this all put together, it doesn't allow you to put it into four-wheel. It doesn't allow you to put it into low range while it's in two-wheel drive. Well, I want to eliminate that. I'll explain why later. But I want to be able to use this in low range in two-wheel drive. Okay, this output shaft here has also got a ball bearing. We've got to put this bearing on, and it goes into this housing with a snap ring. Alright, I'll put an impact wrench on that after we get it in there. Okay, the next quick thing is, I should have showed you better, but inside here we've got a little detent ball that goes in and a spring. And after that spring, there is a plug that goes in here. And this lines up, what is the right word? It detents, I don't know. This thing into its correct spot. So that when you shift this thing from neutral to low or high or whatever, it puts it in the right actual spot. It doesn't let you I can't get it to move. There. It doesn't let it go halfway in. It snaps all the way in. And stays. Alright, that'd be high gear. Okay, the last thing we got to do is put this back e-brake housing on. This had a couple of shims, and these shims are what you set the preload on these two bearings and keep this stuff squished together. Keeps the bearings, you know, in a bind, because they're tapered roller bearings. They've got to be under a preload. And I'm afraid these aren't going to be enough, and they didn't send any extras or anything with a kit. Yep, that last bolt, I got just a little bit of restriction there. I think that's perfect. Okay, this is as far as I'm going with this, which is pretty much it's done. But I'm not going to put the handles on it or this yoke until we get it installed, so it just will be less in the way. I am going to go ahead though, make sure this is clean, and I wanted to show you this. This actually is what aligns this to the transfer case. The bearing here has got a machine pocket that's inside the transmission, but most of it sticks out in here, and this is, as I say, what lines it up. Realize it's dark under here, y'all probably can't see anything, but I got this washer and nut to hold the gear on, and this was loose when we disassembled this. It probably doesn't have a super high torque spec, but it's supposed to be tight, because that's what holds the shaft and everything up against that gear. It doesn't let the shaft go, excuse me, against the bearing. It doesn't let the shaft go in and out. I looked everywhere for my light, and I finally found it. It was in the Jeep. I looked everywhere. I don't believe I'm going to do anything to this PTO. I believe there's a chain in here. I don't really feel any slack in any of the bearings or anything. Nothing sounds too rough. It's smooth. And when this is kicked out, this collar comes forward. When it's kicked in, this collar comes forward and it gauges in the output gear of the transmission. So when this is kicked into neutral, nothing's turning. There's no bearings freewheeling or anything. And well, I just think it's going to be all right. Anyway, the gasket they sent doesn't fit. It won't go over the deal. I'm just going to smear some silicone on there and go bolt this on real quick. Well, I have done some more things, and it's actually getting late in the evening now. I've spent most of the day on this. I don't remember exactly where we were. I put this on with some silicone and I put both drive shafts in. I think that's about all that's happened. I sort of finished putting some bolts up. But one thing I've actually been working on is I sort of reared back and hocked to a set of gears in this thing. This had 538 gears in it, a Dana 44, and that gave a maximum speed of about 45 miles an hour at 3,000 RPMs. This engine in this thing, it's a little bitty motor, but it's 4 3/8 stroke, and it's got a rod in it that's about 14 inches long or something. And I think 3,000 RPMs is way up in the ultra extreme speed for this thing. I'm afraid 3,000 is right on the edge of slinging parts out of it. Anyway, went from a 538 gear down to a 4.27, and this should take my road speed from about 45 miles an hour up to about 56. And I think 55 or 56 is fast enough. I feel like 42 or 45 is not. I think that's just flat too slow to drive down the road. Anyway, got the drive shafts in it. There wasn't a whole lot went on here. It was just sort of some, putting the drive shaft bolts in takes a long time. I'm not going to put the skid plate on yet. There's just a few things left to do here. Oh, there's a screwdriver. I got to put oil in here, and here, and here, and in here. So I'm gonna get that done. I'm gonna take the emergency brake. I got to build a rod for this. I'm gonna tie this up and get it out of the way. The skid plate's not going on yet. I'm thinking I want to drive this thing around, make sure there's nothing leaks. And well, I'm gonna put oil in everything, and my goal is to drop it down, put all the gear shifts and stuff in it, and go drive it. Alright, I got everything buttoned up, I believe, except up here. I got oil and everything, drive lines in it. I actually lost a lug nut when I had the tires off when I put the gears in it, but it'll pop up. Let's work on some of this. So I had in the middle of the week, I had an off-camera day. I ran the wire, the cloth covered wire for the gas gauge, and so I had the dash out of it. I need to put this back in. And then I also started, you can see the seats in there. I got the seat frames in and the seat cushions, and I stuck the seat cushions on. We'll kind of finish working on that in a minute. Alright, I got to put these shifters in. This may be, I guess I got to go like this. This may be a little bit of a Chinesian puzzle. That wasn't bad. Tell you what, I need to go ahead and bolt the seat in. I've got one bolt in the other side. So I'm going to throw the floor pan in it, and then we're going to go drive it. The only really thing I've got left to do is I've got to rig up this e-brake. It just needs a rod made that goes, I guess, from here. I really didn't understand. Oh, I forgot the PTO. We got to put the PTO shifter in it. All right, I'm gonna put screws in that floor pan, and then we're gonna go drive it around. I was gonna show you too. I got my ratchet, my gas tank strap here. This had a date on it. It was actually, it's old. Yeah, 1951. pretty cool. Correct vintage. I gotta get some Loctite and Loctite my shifters. Alright, I want two-wheel drive. And reverse. Well, it feels like it goes a lot faster. Alright. I think I'm finally ready to go drive this thing around. I'm gonna kind of get out of the city. I want to put some miles on it today. I'm gonna drive it, you know, at 55 or something for at least 20 or 30 minutes. I'll kind of catch you when we get out somewhere and get some miles put on it. Like something's smoking. Oh, I believe it's blow by. Just open the hood and look at it. I've drove about probably 7 or 8 miles at about 55 miles an hour. Yeah, that's just blow by. You can see the gasoline boiling in there. It's kind of vapor locking. Hope it doesn't run out of gas. It got a little bit warmer than I would like too. It was up to about 200. It's dropped about 10 degrees. So this speedometer is off by a factor of a fourth. 40 miles an hour is actually 50 because of the gear change. Let's do a 0 to 50 time and a 0 to 55 or something. All right, here we go. I spun out a little bit. That's on the wood. Up to 35. Alright, tubers, we got to finish this thing, and I have got a story to tell. Okay, so I got to tell y'all a story about an unbelievable amount of bullcrap, and I think instead of dragging y'all through a week's worth of video, me scratching my head, the story's probably a better one to tell. So we went and drove this thing. If I remember correctly, that's the last sort of part y'all watched. I got back, I didn't really have any trouble, except when I got close to back to being home, it started sort of cutting out. It would just, like, you just turn the key off and back on just about as quickly as you could, just for, you know, a split second. It would just quit. And as I got home, the closer I got, the worse it got. Then it got to the point when you had it idling, it would actually die. It would start right back up. It'd sit there and run for 3 or 4 seconds and then quit. So when we got back, the only few things we had left to do is it needed a tune-up, it needed plugs, points, a condenser. We had to bolt the skid plate on. I actually already did that off camera. I got the skid plate bolted on. It's just 4 bolts. And need a windshield. And y'all are actually on the windshield frame. I got the windshield took apart. I got a new piece of glass cut with a new gasket. We're fixing to put that in. But anyway, we needed to do a tune-up on it. And I've got here a thing called a dwell meter. And I've actually got 2 dwell meters. This is one of them, and there's another one on my dragster over there. And this is the device that you use to set points correctly. And this actually gives you, in degrees of crank rotation, it's a gauge. It shows you how many degrees that the points are closed, and that's how you set the gap or whatever. Don't get lost here, this is part of the story, but I've got 2 dwell meters, and this one is actually powered off. It's self-powered. It's got 3 C batteries in it, and you don't have to have a power source. It's self-powered. I've got another one over there that's got a digital tack on it, and it actually runs off the power from it. You just clip 2 clips on the battery of the engine. These do the same thing, but they do it in opposite ways. This one actually measures when the points are closed, and it actually is when there's a short, basically from these 2 cables. Whenever this is shorted, it reads that as a points closed. The other dwell meter reads the opposite way. It actually reads a voltage on the coil that whenever the points are open, that's what it reads. And you know, it does the electronic calculations, whatever. They read exactly the same thing. They just do it 2 different ways. So anyway, we got home, and I assumed it probably was a set of points. The points are bad. They weren't making good contact, and we hadn't touched them yet. And so we put this other dwell meter on it, fired up, and sure enough, when the engine would stumble, it would look like the points didn't close. Simple enough. I guess right now let's catch a few clips of actually doing a tune-up on this. I want y'all to watch me put a set of points in it. Alright, that is how you change points and condensers. Or points and a condenser. I'm going to go ahead and put a set of plugs in it. I was kind of debating on the heat range of these plugs. I initially actually bought a number 12 Champion number 12 plug. I felt like it probably needed a hotter plug in it because this thing's pretty smoky. So AT, what the heck is that? Autolite Racing AT12. AT2. I initially bought a hotter plug because this thing used a bunch of oil. I figured it probably needed a hot plug in it. And I got to thinking, this engine is going to have to be ran wide open going down the road to go road speeds. It probably does actually need a cooler range plug. And so I went ahead and bought another set of 8s. And we're going to gap these. They probably need to be gapped about 35. That's a little tight. That's my guess. I didn't actually get a spec on it. So I went in there on the computer and did some looking, and it seems to me, I don't think they've made this plug since about 1970. I think these plugs must be 50 years old. So anyway, fire it up. After I put the points in it, we're going to set the dwell to the dwell meter, and basically what happens is it still dies. It's even worse, it's harder to start, and when you try to rev the engine up, the engine won't rev up. Like, you put it on the floor neutral and it won't turn 3,000 RPMs. And I scratched my head and scratched my head and thought, what in the world is going on? Also, the dwell meter was all over the map. As you rev it up, the dwell would go down, and sometimes it would just, it would just fall. Like the engine would stumble, the dwell would go actually high, like the points weren't opening. And I was just at a loss. It had a little bit of wear in the distributor that I talked about, and I thought maybe the distributor wear was bad. I didn't know how the oil pump worked. I thought maybe the oil pump gets to a certain point, it tries to cock the distributor rod one way or something. Anyway, I was at a complete loss. So basically, I get online, buy a new distributor, overnight distributor from Summit, pay a bunch of money for it, and the night that I ordered it, I'm laying in bed, and I think, you know what? There's got to be something wrong with those points. The only way that if you rev the engine up, the dwell goes down is if the points are floating. So basically, I come out here, and I think they're gone in the trash now, but the points have got a little metal strip that works as a spring, and it's supposed to have two parts, or a lot of them have got two parts. It's got a thin copper one that's the electrical conductor, and it's got a steel one that's the spring. Well, on the set of points I put in, they had made it without the steel little spring. It was just a little copper band, and I didn't catch that when I put it in. I don't work on a lot of engines that have got points, and I just didn't know. So anyway, I file the old points, put the old points back in it, and now the engine runs again, but it's still got this stumble. It'll start, it'll sit there idle for a few seconds, and it'll die. Sometimes you start it cranks a while, cranks, and then starts. So finally I got to the point that I scratched my head, and I thought, what in the world is possibly going on with this thing? And I kept thinking it had to be something with the points, because every time the engine would stumble, the dwell meter would go up or down. I've forgotten which direction it was going. I think it was actually, anyway. So I was at a loss, and I just tried everything. I didn't know what to do. And so I went and got my other dwell meter that runs off batteries, put a set of batteries in it, and hooked it up. And this one read differently. It had a perfect dwell even when the engine would stumble. And I thought, what is going on? And then it dawns on me, I got a wire loose or something. There's like a wire on the back of the ignition switch or something that I didn't tighten up. I'm so stupid. Well, that wasn't what it was. A long story short, I should say a long story long now, I suppose, is that this new coil we put on here was bad, and it actually has got, and the guts in it are loose. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but it has got the primary circuit, the primary coil from here to here is internally disconnected. It's coming and going, and ultimately what would happen is this thing would lose contact in here somehow. The engine would stumble, and then there would be no positive voltage on the ground side of this when the points were open, and so that other dwell meter would have an anomaly. It would look like the points stayed closed, I guess. I'm getting my directions mixed up here, but it would show an anomaly. Anyway, this meter showed it fine. So I put the old coil that we took off to begin with on here, and the stumble was gone. And with having the old points back in here, they had enough spring to close themselves. And now I've got a distributor in the carport from Summit that I paid to have overnighted that I no longer need. Anyway, I also got a new one of these and another one of these, and got it put on here. We got that problem solved, and so we're now back to where we were, and we basically need to set the dwell on another new set of points that I put in here. Okay, on this particular dwell meter, you turn this to set, and it's pretty much already set, but you use this just takes up the difference in the charge of the batteries that are in it. And we've got two leads. We've got a ground, and we've got one that goes on the negative side of the coil. I got a US Motorworks coil now, maybe it'll be a better one. Alright, we turn this to dwell, and it's going to show us the degrees of dwell that we've got here, and it says for 4-cylinder use 8-cylinder times 2. We're looking for somewhere between about 36 and 42 or 3 degrees, something like that. So this would be 20, 24, 28, 32. The next one would be 36. So this needs a little bit more dwell. Okay, so what we're going to do here is this screw here is an eccentric, and it allows you or helps you to adjust this. So we need to back this screw off, and we need to move this up because this is the outside points, and this will cause these points to stay closed a little bit longer. This is a really easy adjustment, so it's just sort of trial and error. Just throw this back on there. Crank it back up and see where we be. Yeah, that's got us up. That's down just a little bit, it'd be 36. So that's kind of minimum, but generally points as they wear, the little wear block wears, and the dwell actually will come up. It's sort of counterintuitive as they get worn. We're going to call that good. What else? Okay, the next thing we need to do is we got to set the ignition timing on it. I've had the distributor out, and of course having the points out can also affect it. I have looked and looked and looked at that pulley down there, and I do not see any timing marks, and the only thing I know to do is to make our own. And so let's pull this plug out. I'm going to stick y'all up here somewhere. I'm going to stick a screwdriver down in the cylinder and then turn the engine until I feel the screwdriver hit the piston. I'm trying to just feel to get it right at the very top. Might actually see it. It's a little divot right there in the pulley that doesn't have chalk on it, and I can see it's lined up perfectly with a little lump there on the front of the timing cover. Okay, I got my timing light hooked up. We're going to see where it's at. This thing calls for 5 degrees before top dead center at idle, and I'm going to check that, but more importantly I'm going to check it at high speed, and I want the maximum advance on this engine with this horrible head design. You know, it's low compression, we don't have to worry about detonation. We're going to probably try to get the timing up to around at least 34, 33, 34 degrees, something like that. On the back of my timing light too, you know, we're going to be trying to line the marks up there to 0. We can adjust this, so like if we set this to 5, that will have the you know, when the marks line up down there, that'll be 5 degrees.
We've got way too much timing in this thing.
The timing lock mechanism here doesn't come through very good on camera, but y'all get the idea. Anyway, I get it adjusted and turned down. It was about 10 degrees too much.
Alright, I'm real pleased with it. It seems to actually run a lot better. It sounds a lot better out the tailpipe too. When you have an engine that doesn't have a vacuum advance, which a vacuum advance advances the timing at idle, the engine will sound like it runs better with way too much ignition timing in it, and that's what we had here. Doing that though will actually have the ability to throw the idle jet settings off. You won't be able to get it rich enough, and that's how this thing was. It was kind of thumpy out the tailpipe. It didn't run that great. And the reason for that is there is just a certain amount of fuel that will go through the idle circuit, but with a lot of ignition timing, the engine will run faster and have a higher manifold vacuum, and it will be sucking more air through the carburetor than the carburetor can supply fuel through the idle jet. Of course, as soon as you floor it, that problem goes away, but that is an issue nonetheless. So I am done under the hood of this thing, hopefully. I don't have a very good way to camera angle you here. So here's the gasket. It's a two-piece. This hole goes towards the inside, just like that, and then the wider part goes towards the glass. I'm just going to stick you up here on the lift or something and see if we can get something done.
So this turned into a nightmare for me. This isn't something I ever do. I've kind of read about it. There's a rope method that apparently doesn't work on this because it's not a solid rubber gasket. It's got a lock ring that goes in the middle of the gasket. You've got to put it on the windshield frame first, and then kind of pull it up and lip it around the windshield. Anyway, this was a nightmare. I worked on this for hours, ended up cracking the glass, but I got it in there, and I don't know, moving on.
Well, I don't remember exactly where we left off. I kind of had some trouble with my camera. I did a firmware update and it bricked it. Anyway, I bought another one, got it working. But anyway, we've been, I think I was pretty much done with this. We loaded up. We're in Colorado, outside Salida, and show some video of what we've been doing. got a few things to do. It needs a lot more horsepower. It won't pull it in third gear, and I put those 4.27 ratio gear rear end gears in it, and they're not going to work. I'm going to have to go back to 538 or something. It just doesn't have the power. Anyway, I spent a couple of weeks getting ready to come up here. Hadn't had much videos out. That's kind of where we've been. I had some trouble with the camera. I didn't get this one out. It's 2 weeks late, but anyway, I'm going to be back and at work in a few days, and we'll be back to some normal YouTubing. Appreciate you watching. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.